I do like fantasy and sci-fi. It's always interesting to see how different directors and creators envision these things, whether humanity's living in some hellhole, or even still as they are without knowing these things exist. Nonetheless, today's review is a mixture of fantasy and science fiction, and will be mainly focusing on the completed PC version of Bright Memory, though I may refer to the mobile version as we go through the video given that it's the same game but on a different platform. In Bright Memory, you play as the female operative for the Supernatural Science Research Organisation, or SRO for short, Shelia, as she investigates an attack on an SRO research facility by SAI forces. After accidentally teleporting herself and some of the SAI forces, Shelia wakes up on some floating islands above the North Pole and, whilst exploring, finds that she and the SAI forces aren't the only inhabitants on the island. Join Shelia as she fights against the undead and strange creatures in an action-packed adventure where you shoot and slash up enemies. But is this game any good? Find out in The Good. If anything, the game does look visually impressive regardless of whether you have NVIDIA's RTX ray tracing features on or off. Ray tracing enables reflections to be rendered in things such as reflective surfaces and puddles, among enhancing other effects such as depth of field, ambient occlusion and shadows, to name a few things. For the layman, the game looks very pretty, and this is quite a feat considering the developer FYQD Studio is a one-man team. Hell, even the visuals of the mobile game isn't too bad, all things considered. Whether you're in the lab at the start of the game or in the caverns within the floating islands, I found the game ran pretty solid and was visually appealing with RTX features on. I can also say that the mobile game looks really good, though obviously there are no RTX features in it. The gameplay I found was pretty ambitious. For the most part, you'll be going around shooting up enemies using different weapons, but with some style. Shelia also has other techniques and abilities at her disposal, such as using an EMP pulse to knock enemies up into the air, slow time or deal damage, as well as her light blade where she can chain slashes in between shots, as well as a multiple slash attack or a ground slamming attack which can also knock enemies up into the air. Shelia can learn additional abilities through the use of skill points, which acts as experience in the game. You won't be able to get all of them in one playthrough, so the game does encourage multiple playthroughs to become an unstoppable force of nature. The action I found was quite fast paced, and there's even some bosses and platforming thrown in as a challenge. But with that though, we've reached the end of what I've liked about the game, so let's talk about what I didn't like in The Bad. Firstly, the game is very short. The game can be finished in under an hour, so while it's good for fast paced action and short bursts, the game leaves the player wanting more, which isn't always a good thing. The game was supposed to be, or I presume it was, episodic, and there is another game out there, Bright Memory Infinite, which I'll follow this review up with, but that game doesn't appear to happen directly after the cliffhanger of this game. As a matter of fact, it actually feels more like a reboot of it. The game, I feel, also lacks in story. I found there's no context behind everything that's happening, hoping that the action sequences would make the story take a back seat. From what I gathered about the story, and this was mostly found on the Steam page for the game, and oh boy, here we go, a history lesson. The story involves a pair of swords forged back during the spring and autumn period of ancient China, so about 771 to 476 BC, known as Kancho and Bakuya, which are the Japanese names, or if you want to be real technical, and I apologise for my pronunciation of the Chinese names, Ganzhang and Mo Ye, after the swordsmithing couple who had made them. Other people might know the swords as those twin swords that Archer from Fate's Day Night carries around. The swords, which have been found and researched by SRO, appear to have been made using a mysterious substance which possesses the ability to reanimate the dead, which has caught the attention of the SAI terrorist group. The substance is also responsible for reanimating the undead enemies and creatures that Shelia has to deal with on the floating island. While the story seems interesting enough, it isn't really elaborated on at all in the game, and I didn't even know the involvement of the swords, let alone the backgrounds of the two key characters of the game until I read the Steam page. Whether this was to be elaborated on in later installments or through other material that I was unaware of, it's a little poor not giving that context to the player, whether it's in the form of collectible lore that you can read instead of the artifacts which also didn't help explain things, or dialogue between characters. The game left me with a lot of questions, and it's certainly something I would like answers to. I appreciate the nod to Dark Souls as well as the Dark Souls inspired boss fight, but why is it there? Is it strictly a homage, or is there more to it that I'm not aware of? I also appreciate the fusion of science fiction with Chinese mythology, but I'm the sort of person who enjoys a good story to go with it. But enough ranting, let's wrap things up with the opinion. Don't get me wrong, Bright Memory is a pretty game and well put together in the Unreal Engine, so props to the developer for that. I do like the style of gameplay, though with the mobile controls it was a wee bit of a mess, and I liked that fast-paced action-packed approach it was going for. But what lets it down for me is its short length and lack of story and context, requiring me to read the Steam page for clarification. Sure, games 30 plus years ago had the plot in the manual, but you had to use your imagination for a lot of those, and they're limited to how they expressed those details. That excuse doesn't fly as well with what's around today. Still, give the game a go. It's cheap, it's good for killing time among undead beings and creatures, as well as your Dark Souls 3 character. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Bright Memory a Dark Souls Bonfire out of 10. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.